Alright guys, so welcome back. This video is really exciting because we're going to be working on our add anime page. So that page is going to have the really nice animated HTML input tags, and it's also going to have that little genre tag select box for it. In addition to that, we're also going to finish out fleshing out our MySql script so that you guys have a way to populate that database yourselves whenever you want to restart the database from scratch. We're going to finish off that script. I'm going to show you how to load and create all the tables. And then in addition to that, we're also going to flesh out our API and extend some of our front-end application with some new stores and handling data and things like that. So let's get started with that. Open up your project and let's open up the MySql JS file so that we can start adding on to this. So we're going to finish this file in this video, so that's going to be really exciting. As you can see right here, we have some table statements for SQL for the MySql package to process when we run this script. So right here we have drop table if anime exists, create the anime table with the specific columns, and then load in the data file that we have right here under the CSV folder, and it's called animetable.csv, and so that's right here. And this is everything that gets loaded into the database when we run this script. Okay, so now you guys can do this however you want, but I think what might make the most sense is if we do our drop table statements first all together, and then we'll do our create table statements all together, and then we'll do our load table statements together. So the first portion is going to say, hey, if these tables exist in the MySql database, get rid of them. The second portion is going to say, now we want to recreate these tables, so define them based on the columns that we have set right here. And then after it's created, there's no data in it yet, right? So we need to actually load in the data from our CSV files. And all of those statements are going to go right here. So let's start with that. Let's do query equals, and the first table that we're going to do is the genres. So if this exists, we're going to call our method execute query. We're going to do genres table dropped. So we're going to do the same exact thing for the rest of our tables. So drop table statement for anime genre. We're going to do a drop table statement for our reviews table. We're going to do a drop table statement for our users table. And then we're going to do a drop table statement for our user reviews table. I'm going to add /n right here just so we get a new line character. And I'm also going to add a /n right here so we get a new line character. So the next thing we're going to do is our create table statements. This is going to take a little longer, so let's start with our genres table. And we're going to execute that query for the genre table. For our next table, let's do the anime genre table. And then let's execute that query so it creates that table. The next table we're going to create is our reviews table. And we're going to call our execute query function so it creates that table. The next table we create is going to be our users table. Now this query in particular for the users table was a little long, so I did some string concatenation so we can break it up into multiple lines. And the next thing we're going to do is execute that query. And then the last table we create is going to be our user to review mappings table. So let's create that. And then I'm going to add /n for some nice space. So this is a great place for us to save and make sure that everything is going according to plan. So let's open our terminal. Let's run node MySql JS one more time. And as you can see, now we're doing something different. So we did our anime table first, and then we dropped these tables if they existed, which they don't. And then we created them again. So in MySql, I'm going to refresh our tables. And as you can see right here, our anime table actually has some data in it because we did those load table statements in that MySql file. Anime genre has nothing in it, sad, but that's okay. We're going to load data into it, but it has the columns that we defined. Same thing with genres. It just has a column for the genre and the ID that's going to be unique for us to do those mappings. And then we have a reviews table that's blank, user review table that's blank, and also a user table that's blank. But that's okay, that's exactly what we expected. So let's minimize that and go on to create our load table statements. So the first query we're going to do is we're going to load in our genre table data. So let's do that. Alright, perfect. Now you can see right here, we said we're going to load in this specific file into the genres table. And the file path right here is CSV genres table. So if we look in our CSV folder right here, and our genres table file, it's going to use that specific file. And as you can see, just like I was saying, all it is a specific genre mapped to a number, and they're all unique for the specific table, so that we have a way of telling what number maps to what genre. The next query that we're going to do is for our anime genre table. So let's write that together. All right, perfect. So now you can see right here, I just did some string concatenation again to make it look a little nicer. But all we did is we gave it the file path for the anime genre table, and we told it what table to put that in, and then we gave it an order. Right here, I didn't give it an order, but that's fine. It's already an order. This isn't really necessary since our data is always in the order of the table. But just so that you have that knowledge, we're just going to keep it in there for now. So the next table we're going to do is we're going to do the reviews table. All right, perfect. Now we did our next one for the reviews table. And the last one that we're going to do, or the last two that we're going to do, is our users table and our user review table. And by now you should kind of see a pattern, right? Like you just do that syntax for loading the file, you give it the file path, and then you tell it what table it needs to go into. So we're just going to do the same thing for the next two tables. Okay, perfect. So now we have the user table done. And now we also have the user review table done. So this is a perfect place for us to, again, save our file. And then let's run that script and see what we get. So we're going to do node MySql. And it looks like everything is going according to plan. So let's go on over to our MySql database and check that all of the data is there. So I'm going to open up the application, and then I'm going to refresh all. And then let's query from all the tables where there should be data. So that looks good. That looks good. That looks good. User review looks good. And so does the users table. So perfect. Okay, so now the next portion that we're going to do is going to be a little boring, but we're going to extend our API, our Express API, so that it can handle a couple of different API endpoints for when we make requests from our React app, and it's able to return some data to us using all that information we just loaded into the MySql database. So go ahead and open up your project in whatever text editor you use, and we're going to do open api.js. And you can see that I've just scrolled down to the bottom of the file, and I created some extra space for myself. So the first route we're going to create is the all genres route, and all this is going to do is return us all of the different rows that are in that genre table, so that we have all the different possible categories for a genre that an anime can be a part of. So this is going to be really simple. So let's do app.get, and this API endpoint is going to be all genres, and all we're going to say is select star from genres where ID does not equal 1, because if you look at our MySql database, so I'm going to open that up real quick, and I'm going to query our genres table. You'll see that the first genre is just this blank tag, and I don't really want to make use of that in this application, so we're just going to take everything where the ID does not equal 1 right here. And the only thing left for us to do is to execute this query so we get a response back. All right, perfect. So that was pretty easy. The next API endpoint that we're going to be creating is largest anime ID. And the only thing that this is going to do is it's going to tell us what the largest anime ID is. And so if I query the anime table and sort on the largest anime ID, we can see that this is the largest anime ID, and all of these are unique. So what we're going to do is we're going to have an API endpoint that gets this largest anime ID, and then it returns that to us, and we're going to increase it by 1 so that we have a unique identifier for all of our anime. Again, think of it like the social security number. It's just going to give us a way to uniquely identify all the different anime within our table. So we're going to do app.get. And the API endpoint is going to be the largest anime ID. And so right here, we wrote select max, and then we took the anime ID column. So it's going to give us the largest value in this anime ID column. And we used as so that we can convert that into an alias column. So we want to call it largest anime ID instead of having it max parentheses anime ID returned to us. We want to get this as the return alias for that. So we have a way of accessing it really easily. And then we're just going to execute our query. Okay, and then the last one that we're going to do is we're going to have an API endpoint that actually allows us to send in all of the form values from our add anime form. This one's going to be a little different. It's going to be a post request because we're actually sending data this time. So it's not just get. We're not just receiving data. We're going to do add anime. And this is going to take in all the parameters that I was talking about. So one's going to be name, And this colon syntax is just how you write it, so that's just pretty standard. So those are all the parameters right there defined in the API URL endpoint. So these are going to be all the values that we send with our object to this request, and it's going to take these out and then use them in some way for the query. So we're going to call this const insert anime, and this is just going to be the query that we run. So let's do the backticks right here. And the next thing we're going to do is values. And so now we're going to tell it the values that we want to insert into that new row. All this query is saying we're going to insert into the anime table the new values that we got for this specific request. And then it's going to insert that as a new row using this values syntax right here that we have. And we're going to do name into the name column for the anime table. We're going to do anime ID into the anime ID column, type into type, and so on. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we need to create an array of queries for our insert anime function. So I'm going to do that now, and then after we finish writing this code, I'll go over and tell you what it's all about. So what this is going to do for all of the keys in the genre object, it's going to look something like this. So say, for instance, we have like action, and then that ID is 1, and then we have adventure, that ID is 2. What it's going to do is going to take this key, and then we're going to do a little bit of object traversal right here and just say, when you see this key action, I want you to get the value of it. So this is going to return us the value of 1. So it gives us the ID. And then right here we're going to do return, insert into, and then define the order of the columns. And then insert that anime ID, and then insert the genre ID right there. So we're going to have a queries array. And then we're going to combine all of this into a new array right here. So it takes our first query, insert anime. We use the spread syntax so that all of the items in this array are spread and just into single elements. And then we combine all of that back into a new array that just has one level depth. So it's all going to be on the same level. It's just going to be a regular array like you're used to. And then we're going to do execute query. We're going to do queries.join. So we're going to join it on the semicolon character so that instead of it being an array, it's now just a string. And that's going to allow us to do multiple queries. So perfect. So let's save and scroll to the top. The next thing that we need to do is we need to add a package that we installed previously. I'm pretty positive we installed it together. So if we didn't, make sure that you install body parser on your command line. You can do npm install body parser exactly as it's spelled right here. I'm pretty sure we did that together, can't really remember, but you know, if we did, then just do this require body parser at the top because we're going to be using this package. And if we didn't, just simply go into Google, or I think you can literally do npm install body parser just like this and it'll install it. So you can just do that. So we're going to do this. And then we're also going to add that middleware into our Express API. And then we're going to do app.use body parser. All right, perfect. So what exactly does this do? So by default, this took me a really long time to find out actually. It was kind of a fun learning experience. But basically, the web browsers don't allow you to make API requests that involve sending data by default. It's kind of a security measure that they introduced as a web standard. So what we need to do is we need to use this body parser right here so that we can actually send post requests, and that it's actually going to be able to receive JSON data in the correct format that we send it in our post requests. So this looks pretty good. Let's go into our terminal and try to run this and make sure everything's good. Alright, perfect. It looks like everything's good, so we're going to wrap this section up right here, and then we're going to move on to the fun stuff now and actually do our React application. So let's go into our My App folder in our project directory, go into Source, and create a new folder, and this folder is going to be called utils, or utils for utility, and we're going to have a new file, and it's just going to have one function in it. The file is going to be called index.js. And we're going to do export function to camel case. Now all this is going to do, it's going to take in a string and it's going to capitalize the first letter. We're really only going to use this, I think, in maybe 1 or 2 places. So what this is going to do is going to say, hey, take the first letter that's uppercase and then combine it with a substring of the original string without the first letter, and that goes all the way down to the length of the string. So perfect. That's all we need to do right here. Next thing we're going to do, I know this is kind of the boring stuff, but I think it's better to get this out of the way. We're going to go into our actions folder in our index.js file and start to add some actions that we're going to be using in our application now. So let's go ahead and define these. These are going to refer to the API endpoints that we just defined together. So let's do one for get all genres. Let's do one for get largest anime ID. And then let's do one for add anime. And this one's going to be a little different than the other ones. It's going to take in an anime, and we're going to take out the name and the type from that anime object that's sent to us in this action. And then we're going to do toaster.success, so we're going to have a little notification after this is called. And it's going to say added the, and we're going to give it the type.to lowercase because it might be uppercase. And then we're going to give it the name of the anime to the anime table. So this is going to give us the type of anime, so it's either going to be, you know, like a movie or a film or an OVA or something like that. And it's going to give us the name of the anime, and then it's going to just say that it added it to the anime table. And then we're going to redirect our user to the home page of our app. So we're going to do history.push to utilize React Router. And then we're just going to return that anime you know, to the event. So the event dispatcher is going to take in this action and then fire off into space the anime data that we sent into it, and then our anime store is going to consume that and do something with its event handler. So let's save this. That looks pretty good. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our store for our anime store. So let's open up this file. And we're going to do the same thing that we did up here. We're going to define a function, map it to an action so that it knows what to do whenever it receives that action, and then calls our API endpoint and does something with the store state. So first one at the top, let's define our API endpoint. So we're going to do const add URL. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to bind a method called handle add anime to the add anime action. Let's scroll down and create this function together. So we're going to do handle add anime. It's going to take in that anime object that our action passes to us. And we're going to do our console.log statement, something really simple. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do actually is use Axios in order to do this post request. So what we need to do, sorry for missing this step, is we need to go and install this package. So let's go to our project directory. Mine's React tutorial, and it's in the My App folder. And here we're going to do npm install Axios, just like that. Wait for it to install. All right, great. And now that it's done installing, that's really all we needed. So let's go on back and let's import that into our store. So we're going to do const Axios equals require Axios. All right, excellent. And now we can make our post request with that Axios library. And the reason we're not using fetch is because I'm pretty sure fetch is only used for get requests. I might be wrong, but this is something I'm just more familiar with for post requests. So that's what we're going to be using. So let's use that add API endpoint, and let's start adding on the different parameters we're going to send it in our API request. So we're going to do type, name, anime ID, and then I'm going to finish writing all these out. And then we're going to bind all the different properties to that anime object that we got. All right, perfect. So what do we have here? So we're going to get that anime object, right, as an argument that's sent to our handle add anime method. And all we're going to do is for these params that are set up right here in our API request, we're actually going to bind those values to the appropriate value in the anime name object, because right now these are just empty. So what we do is we define a variable for each of these that corresponds to the name. So name is going to be set to the anime name. Anime ID is going to be set to the anime ID right here for this object that's sent to us up here. And then we're going to do the same thing for all of these different params that are set up in our URL. So this is a promise, so we need to use .then. And so when this resolves, what we need to do is this .handle get animes and just send in that empty string. And then we just need to do .catch in case there's any errors. So let's go ahead and take that. All right, perfect. Now I am pretty positive that's all we need to do right here for now. So let's go on over and create a new file for our genre store. So let's do genrestore.js. All right, we're going to create our store just like we did with our anime store. And then let's define the two API endpoints that this store is going to be in charge of. It's going to be in charge of getting all the genres, so the genre URL. And then it's going to also get the largest anime URL. Now I know this doesn't really make sense. Why won't we put this in the anime store? And I definitely agree. I should have changed it to that anime store. But this is the way that I wrote it for now, and too lazy to change it, so we're just going to keep it right there. And now we're going to define our class. And we're just going to do our constructor at the beginning like usual. So this .genre is going to be the only class attribute that we need to get account or need to keep track of. And then we're going to bind our listeners to the different methods that we define. Now let's go and define these methods. So handle all genres. It's going to take in a payload, and the payload doesn't really matter. So that's just going to be the empty string because we want everything. So it's just going to be genre store. Okay, so we'll just do that console log, and then we'll do a simple fetch request to get the data from our API endpoint. So let's pass in the genre URL. So we tell Express, hey, this is the one that I want you to resolve. So all this is going to do, it's going to request this API endpoint in our Express app. It's going to get a response, convert it to JSON, and then we're going to use that JSON, set it to the genre store state, and then whoever's listening for this, whoever we set up an on-change handler in our React application, it'll get a notification that the store is updated, and then we can do something with that state that we get back. Now let's do the same thing for handle get largest anime ID, and then with that JSON, let's just get the largest anime ID back from the first element in that array. And then we're going to do return this dot set state largest anime ID is equal to the largest anime ID. Okay, perfect. So that's pretty easy. Why don't we look at our API so I can explain what we did there. So all genre is pretty simple. We just contacted this, and it's just going to get us basically all the genres right there. It's just going to be a list of strings. So all we had to do right here is convert the genres into JSON, and then, or excuse me, not a list of strings. It's an object of all the different. It's an object of all the different genres that we have. So then right here, this one was a little different. So we did a GET request as well for the largest anime URL API endpoint, and then it gave us back a JSON object or just an object, and it happened to be an array. And so then we destructured off of the first element in that array a key that was called largest anime ID, and then we set that equal to the largest anime ID for the state that who is ever going to be listening for this on-change handler. So let's go to API, and as you can see right here, we aliased it right to that largest anime ID with the underscores, and that's why we destructured this right there, because it's going to give us that object from the array. Last thing that I did forget actually is we need to do some fast export default for this genre store like we did with the other ones. Okay, so we need to add a closing parentheses right there, save, and now we're good to go. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to start creating some new components in our anime form folder. So navigate there, let's do new file, and the first component we're going to do is the input list.js. So let's start off by importing React, and we're going to actually make use of that camel case function that we defined in our utility class. So let's go here. We're going to go to utils, perfect, and we're just going to import that. And we're going to do const input, or input list, excuse me. And we're going to destructure out some props that get sent to us. So they're going to be, we're going to send two props, form values and handle input. I know none of this makes sense right now because we haven't even made the form together yet, but trust me, it will. We'll go over that at the end as well. Alright, so we're going to go through the rest of our class. So at the top we're going to do input JSX, and this is just going to be an array of JSX that stores basically everything that we print out to the screen. So all of our HTML tags. So we're going to do object.keys. Form values is going to be an object, so we're going to iterate through all of the keys in that object. And we're going to use map to iterate all over those keys, taking the key, so that we can return some JSX. So we're going to get the value by doing this form values key syntax. And this is basically going to say, hey, for this specific key that's in the object, I want you to actually give me the value for that key. You're going to do const key name equals key.to lowercase, because I want it to be lowercase. And then we're going to return some JSX for this input JSX variable. So let's go right here. Let's do div key equals key name. We're going to do class name equals animated input box. Alright, and the key name is going to be unique. It's never going to be the same, so that's why we can establish that key there. Whenever you iterate over something and you're returning some type of iteration like an array or anything like that, you actually need to supply a key so that React can have some unique identifier that's going to allow it to access that from the DOM. So now the next thing we're going to do is return our actual input. And we're going to do class name equals animated input. Now we haven't defined any of these CSS classes. That's okay. We're going to do that in a second. ID is going to be key name. Name is going to be key name. Placeholder is going to be using a placeholders object that we use. So I'm going to explain that in a second, but for now just write that. Value equals value. And onChange equals handle input. Perfect. And then the next thing we're going to do is our label, HTML4. And so this is just some syntax to tell the HTML tag what input tag this label is for. And then we're going to do to camel case, and it's going to use the key name. Excuse me, let's clean this up right here and do label. We're going to put to camel case inside of the label right there. And then the last thing we need to do is actually return this to our input list component. And then at the end we're going to do export default input list. Sorry, no caps lock. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to do const placeholders. And this is going to be an object. And then we also need to add from React right here. So what this does, it's going to take in two of the props, form values, so it's going to have an object that looks basically like this, and it's going to have some values associated with it. So for name, whatever the user types in for the name input tag, for the type, whatever the user types in for the type input tag, and so on. It's also going to take in a function to handle the input, so as we're typing onto the keyboard, what does our anime form class component need to do? Okay, so now right here we have some syntax for the input JSX. This is an array of JSX. It's going to iterate through all of the keys in the form values. It's going to take out the value for each specific key. So right here it's going to take out the value. And then it's going to take the key name, so name, type, episodes, blah, 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 and just lowercase it. Just make sure that it looks nice and it has that lowercase key value that our anime form is going to use. We need to make sure it's lowercase and not uppercase. And then once it does all that, it's going to return some JSX. So it's going to be a div, and it's going to be an input tag. So it's a little input text box that you can type in. These are the class names we're going to define down the line. This is the unique key that we assign, so React doesn't yell at us. And this placeholder part right here, all of this stuff is basically standard for the input tag, is going to say, hey, let me look at this placeholder object. And if the user hasn't typed, then I'm going to show whatever this placeholder value is. So say it's going to go its first iteration and look at the name key. And for the placeholder, it's going to say, okay, so the name key, I need to take out this value for the placeholder, so your name. So this input tag is going to show your name. And this will be a lot more easy to explain visually later on. And then right here for the label, that's just some text we're going to show on the screen for the label of the form so that we can have a nice little animated label right there when you click on it. So perfect, that's all we're going to do for input list JSX. The next file we're going to do is genre tags.js. So let's go ahead and define that together. So let's do import React from React, const genre tags. And this is going to be a functional component as well, so it's destructure some props that get sent to us. And we're going to know all of these ahead of time, so that's why we can do this. And handle click. So whatever the selected genres are, whatever they've clicked so far for the genre tags, and then all of the possible genres. So let's do const genre buttons. We're going to do genres.map. We're going to take in that genre, put an equal sign. We're going to do const genre name equals genre.genre, because the genre is going to essentially be an object. Then we're going to do const selected equals selected genre. So again, whatever that genre is, that genre name is, go through the selected genres object, and if it's true, then assign the selected value to true, and if it's not selected, assign it to false. And this is going to do a little CSS coloring for us so that we know so we have some type of visual indicator to tell us what's selected and what's not. So for the class name, we're going to do inline block. Now we haven't done any of this together yet, so don't worry about the class names. We're going to do that at the end. So it's going to be inside a div. We have a button. We're going to do a class name. And this is actually going to be kind of cool. This is going to be a ternary expression. So it's going to be, if it's selected, then we're going to give it this class name, genre button selected. And if not, we're going to give it genre button class name. So on click, you're going to do that handle click prop that is passed to us. ID is just going to be the genre.id, and these are always unique, so that's perfect. And then the name is going to be the genre.genre. And then for the actual text on the button, we're going to show the genre. And then at the very end, we're going to return the genre buttons JSX to our functional component. So something actually gets rendered to the screen. All right, perfect. So that's about wrapping it up for that. Now the last portion that we're going to do is our anime form. So let's go on to anime form and start to bake this out. This is going to be the longer of the two files. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to import some stuff at the top. We're going to import our genre store. We're going to import our actions. We're going to import the input list that we just created. And we're going to import the genre tags that we just created. All right, perfect. That's looking good. So let's create some initial state for our class component. We're going to have a state for genres, the selected genres, that's going to be an object, and then the form values, which is going to be an object itself. And then we also need one for the largest anime ID, which we're going to set to null in the beginning. So let's clean this up right here, type, perfect, and save that. Alright, so first thing that we're going to want to do, when this component mounts, we want to get all of the possible genres so we can pass that to our genre tag. So in component did mount, do genre store.listen, we're going to do this.onChange, and then we're going to dispatch some actions. So actions.get all genres, and then actions.get largest anime ID. Because we need to get the largest anime ID for when we actually click that submit form button. And then when the component unmounts, we just want to unlisten, so we do that memory cleanup and there's not going to be any more errors. So let's do our onChange method as well. So we're going to do store, we're going to do const, we're going to destructure the values from our store that we need to. So it's going to give us the genres back and the largest anime ID back, because those are the actions that we dispatched when we mounted the component. So this dot set state. And then we're going to set that to our state in the component, and then we're going to do largest anime ID as well. So we're going to do handle input. This is going to be for all of the input tags. We're going to destructure the form values from our state, and then we're going to get the ID and the value from the event. So we're going to do event.target. And then we're going to simply assign our form value state object to whatever the new value was from our input. Okay, great. So now we're going to do handle submit. And we're going to do event.prevent default, because whatever the browser does by default, I don't want it to do that. We're going to define that functionality ourselves. So now we're going to destructure some stuff from state. So form values, largest anime ID, selected genres, and that's going to be from this dot state. Okay, and now we're just going to do form values dot anime ID and that's going to be whatever the largest anime ID was plus 1. So we offset it. This is going to be the new largest anime ID. Now we're going to do form values dot genres, and whatever the selected genres were from our genre tag component, that's what we're going to set to the genres in this form values. And then we're going to do actions dot add anime and send in that form values object. So that's going to be all the data that's sent to our API endpoint, and then it's going to add a new row and handle all of that into the MySql database, like what we have in our Express app for all the logic there. So let's do our handle click button, and this is going to be for the genre tag. So again, prevent default. We're going to do const genre equals event.target.name. We're going to do const genre ID equals event.target.id. And then we're going to do some destructuring. So we're just going to get these selected genres so we don't mutate state in any way. And then we're going to set these selected genres to whatever it needs to be. So basically what this says is you click the genre tag button once, right? And if it was already previously clicked, then we want to delete it from our selected genres state value so that it's going to update the color in some way on our form. And that'll make more sense when we go over it visually. So don't worry if it's confusing. So this dot set state and selected genres. Okay, perfect. So now we're at the second to last step. Very close. So let's actually render the final JSX to our string. Screen. So we're going to do const form values, take all this from state, and let's just delete this completely, and we're going to return a div. It's going to act as the container. We're going to do div class name. This one's going to be add form card. Do another class name of add form title. And all this is going to be is add anime. Okay, and then we're going to actually do our form. Let's do another div. And then let's render our input list inside of this div. In the form values, we're going to send whatever our state form values are. And then the handle input to update any additional form values when that user types into the box. And then one more div below. And this is going to be our submit button. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to do another div for our genre tags. Alright, perfect. So let's just do a paragraph. And then the text for this paragraph is just going to say genres. And then we're going to render our genre tags component. Alright, perfect. We need to go back to our actions file and we need to import history. Okay, so save that. We do use it right here, so we actually need to, just make sure we import that. Alright, an anime form, I accidentally misspelled selected genres. So let's do that right here, and let's also do that right there. Alright, another thing we need to do in handle input, let's do event.target. Accidentally did a misspelling right there. Okay, so now that we've fixed all of those, let's go ahead and run npm start, and then our node api.js. Let's open up our browser. Go localhost 3000, go to the add anime form, and would you look at that? It's right there, but it's extremely ugly, and that's because we haven't written any of those CSS classes, so that's why it looks so disgusting right here. But let's just quick and test this and make sure that this is actually getting sent to the database and we're getting what we want. So let's click add anime. It looks like we got our notification, perfect. And if we sort by the newest, alright, perfect. So it has a new anime ID, the name, and all the properties we sent in. So last step, let's reset that, just so it goes away. And last step, what we're going to do is add some style. Okay guys, last step, everyone should be really excited. It's finally going to come together and we're going to have something pretty to look at. So open up your style sheet.css and let's start writing those file classes. So first thing, I want to strip off all of the default CSS on the HTML button tags. The A tag should be fine. We're going to set some custom style for input tags that are of type submit. So that's where we had that submit button on the anime form. Next, what we're going to do is input type submit as well, but then when it's on focus. So when focused, I want the background color to be different, and I also want the color to be different. So we're going to use our primary dark green here. And then we're going to do color white. Next thing we're going to do under centered row, we're going to do left aligned. All this is going to do is do text align left. Inline block is just going to do display inline block, obviously. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Okay, and then we're going to scroll all the way down, and we're going to actually do the fun stuff for our anime label inputs. So for label and also for the dot animated input class, we're going to add a transition for the animation. So it's all going to take 0.2 seconds. We're going to text align left, and then we're going to make the color black. For the animated input box class, we're going to add some display. So flex flow is going to be column reverse. We're going to do width 90%, and then margin bottom is going to be 6px. Next one, we're going to do the actual animated input. So this is for the input tags. Font size, let's just do 1em. Border radius 3px. Border is going to be 3px solid white. We're going to have padding. We're going to make the cursor a text cursor. And so that's just going to change the icon on the mouse. Then we're going to do animated input. So when this input box is on focus, we're going to do outline none, but we are going to have a border, and that's going to be 3px solid, and that's going to use our primary dark green as well. Alright, now we're going to have some CSS just for the label. So text transform, that's going to be uppercase, so that's just going to make it in all capital letters. The letter spacing is going to be 0.05 em. And then the padding left is just going to have some 5px right there. So we add a little bit of space to the left. Alright, next, animated input. So when the placeholder is not shown, the label is going to have this CS. That's all that fancy syntax means right there. I know it's a little confusing. So let's add all of this in. And I'm actually just going to copy and paste all of this in. You can pause the video. So right here, I just copy and pasted the CSS. Nothing really of note, just know that text overflow, if the label doesn't fit into that input tag or into that label width, then we're just going to add some trailing dots for the ellipsis. So next one, we're going to do animated input. And we're going to use the WebKit prefix. So input placeholder. We're going to do opacity 0, transition inherent. Next, we're going to do animated input focus, and then same thing again, WebKit -input placeholder, and we're going to set the opacity to 1. So let's take out one of those, and then let's also add one right there, my mistake. Alright, and then the last one I'm actually going to copy and paste in, so you can pause the video and copy this down. But all this says is for the anime input, when the placeholder is not shown, we want to apply this CSS right here for the label. And then also right here, when the animated input is focused, we want to apply this CS right here to the label. So it's just going to transform a little bit. It's going to bring it up, translate it towards the screen, and then also scale it, so make it a little bigger. And you're going to see that animation, and it looks really cool. So let's do our last CSS classes for the add anime form card. And again, I'm going to copy and paste this in here. This is just going to give us a nice little card style for that form container. Next one we're going to do is add form title. All this is going to do is it's going to add some background color to our form title container, and then kind of give it a little bit of a shape right there for the border radius. We're going to add some padding to the actual contents of the form. For the form elements or all the genre tags, And I think this is actually applied to the input tags as well. We want to specify how big the width can be. For the add form submit button, we want to give it some background color, set the font size a little bit, and then just do a little bit of additional spacing and border and add some padding on the inside of it. The next thing for that submit button on the form, when you hover over it, we're going to change the background color to our dark green. And then next we're going to apply some style to our genre button, and then also to our genre button when it is selected. So this just says display it inline block, add some spacing, and then add a light green background color. And then last but not least, when the genre button has the selected class name, we're going to make it that dark green so that the user has some indication that it was selected, so that was clicked. And then the last one is going to be when the genre button is on hover and we have that background color. And that's just going to be that dark green as well, telling you that you can click it. So let's save this. Okay, so now let's open up our app, refresh it, and go to that add form anime page. So why don't we start typing? I'm going to add my name, Ryan Michael. And as you can see, once you fill out the input box, the label stays up there, so that's really great to do. We did that with CSS as well. Now the next thing we did was the genre tag CSS. And I'll open up the genre tag. So what we said was, hey, if it's selected, so if the selected genres object that's sent to us has this genre name that we pull out from the genre object, then we're going to set that to true, otherwise we'll set it to false. So if it is selected, then let's apply that genre button selected class name with this inline ternary expression for the class name, and that's how we were able to get this nice little effect where you can hover over it, change the color, and when you click on it, it actually stays that solid green. And if we look at our anime form, you can see that on click, it actually handles this, right? So it takes whatever the current selected genres is, and then right here, we decide, hey, does that genre that was passed in the target, so whatever the button was clicked, does that exist right now in our state? If it does, since this is a toggle button, let's delete it. So let's kind of go through that. So it exists, right? So let's click it. And now it's gone. Now it's deleted because it executed this line of code right here. It existed in our state when we pulled out the object. We got the genre, so it deleted it. So that class name is no longer there. It's basically unselected. And if it's not there, then we're going to add it. And the way that we add it is we set the selected genres object for that specific genre name to the ID of the genre. The ID of the genre that we get right here, genre ID, is actually a string, so we want to convert that into an int, or the other way around. I can't remember what parson, can't remember which way parson goes. It could have been completely the opposite of what I said right there. But basically, we're going to get that ID number and set it to the value for this key in the object. So if we click again, we can see that now it's been selected. Perfect. So let's click. Or let's right-click and inspect real quick, because I want to show you the genre store that we bound to the console as well. So go over to your console. You could right-click and just click that inspect button. And as you can see, our genre store was updating perfectly. So let's do genre store, and as you can see, it's there. We can call get state, and we can look at what's in here. So perfect. One thing that was bound to state was the largest anime ID, and as well as the genres. So just like I said, it's an array. It's got objects in it, and the genre is the name of the genre, so right here. And the ID is that unique identifier. You can also see the methods that are bound here, and you can also see the largest anime ID property being saved there. So let's look at our genre store. And in our constructor, we did not assign that to a class attribute right here, but you still get it because we called return this.setState right here, and you can see that it sets the largest anime ID for the class, and then that is saved to the store right here, as you can see, and that's what our component consumes in order to make that add anime request. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. You can basically just visualize that this largest anime ID exists here after we call handle get largest anime. So that's why you see it in the console right there. For largest anime ID is one of the class attributes. So why don't we go ahead and add this and make sure that our SQL database is doing fine, because that's going to wrap up the end of our video. So let's do add anime. It looks like we added the fill and round angle to the anime table. Perfect. And you can see that an object was printed out to the console here. It didn't show it to me. Okay, perfect. So we can see that it's been added to the anime database. Let's check MySql and make sure. Okay, so I just opened MySql, and if we sort, we can see that I've been added to the database right here on the top row. And if we sort the anime genres, we can see that this was just added right here. Perfect. So the row ID is a little messed up, not sure why, but the anime ID has all the different mappings for what we added. So 34528, which is the ID right here for my anime ID. And you can see all the multiple mappings for that add form request that we did together. All right, perfect. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope it was a little more informative. I'm actually going to take a break from this series for a little bit because I want to create a video for you guys for Apple TV. I'm going to have a tutorial on how to recreate that with React, and I think it's going to be really cool. I hope that you guys really enjoy it, so just stick around for that, and thank you all for watching. I'll see you then.